Are you betting the house on a Colorado national championship? Well, maybe if you're not, but Colorado fans are. Let's talk about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Buffs.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I'm your host, Kevin Borba, and joining me is John Garcia Jr., my recruiting expert / insider / savant. That's your title, John. Just in your bio.
Big title. It's a big one. I don't know if it fits on the screen, but I'll take it.
It might. We're gonna test it out, take it for a test drive. Today on this lovely Monday, we're talking betting odds for Colorado's national championship. We're talking Mike Norvell and Florida State, and then we got an interesting comp for Shedeur Sanders at quarterback. So without further ado, John, I'm just randomly scrolling through social media as one does on a random day, and I come across a tweet that's set from Max Meyer, who is the editorial content writer at Caesar Sports. So he deals with all the gambling articles and all that jazz. A lot of people are betting on Colorado to win the championship this year, and so their odds are currently at plus 20,000 according to Caesar Sports. The only teams that are receiving more bets than Colorado are LSU, Georgia, Bama, Michigan, and Ohio State. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at that last part, that there are bets for, the SEC and Big Ten powers to win it all. I mean, that's exactly where my fake money would go. But obviously, to know that Colorado is the sixth most bet upon national champion pick for 23, it's fascinating. It's one thing to hold buzz, and we've talked about it every show, and it's tangible. You could feel it, whether you talk to recruits, other college coaches, fans, whatever it is, you can feel the Colorado buzz. That's one thing. It's a whole nother ball game to start putting all that together relative to a national title trophy. I skipped over the conference, right? It's like, forget the Pac-12. Let's go straight to the CFP before it expands and go win that thing year one with Deion Sanders. If that happens, it would be borderline insufferable from the Colorado perspective because it has been so buzzworthy already. But this is fascinating. A lot of stuff with Colorado hasn't surprised me from a buzz standpoint, but this absolutely took me by a huge surprise. Look, the odds are great, financially, if you could swing $100, but man, it is to think that they even have a shot would be fascinating. I think the last time I was on with you, Kevin, I talked about the pressure with Shedeur Sanders relative to the expectations of maybe seeing a bowl at Colorado. Mm-hmm. That was the other day. Now we're talking national title a couple days later. I mean, that's how quickly things change at Colorado.
We're talking a national title. And before I go on, I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Buffs your first listen every day. We're available and free wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever it may be. We just did, or maybe it might have been a solo episode. I don't remember, but me and you talked about it. We just talked about Nebraska and TCU being favorites over Colorado. TCU's a 3-score favorite for their week 1 matchup. And then Nebraska was a touchdown favorite. And so that was last week. And now we have people throwing down Chris Benjamins for the Buffs to win a Natty. And I mean, if you got the money to burn, go ahead. I think that's truly the Colorado experience that we've kind of been alluding to this past week or so. Because not mentioned in this tweet or this report is USC, Utah, Oregon, Washington, the 4 powers in the Pac-12 that are all going to be vying for a Pac-12 championship and vying for a playoff spot potentially, and even Oregon State per se. And so to see Colorado, who's, I think the win total, and John had it on his whiteboard, I believe episode 1 was 4.5.
Yeah.
We've jumped up. They're getting the votes from the fans, which is interesting. Colorado fans are very loyal. I've noticed that in my short tenure of covering the program. It's just, that's a level of loyalness I did not expect.
Yeah, it's putting their money where their mouth is. And that's, I think, an important part to focus on, right? We could talk about how we view it, how the players view it, coaches, etc. Theoretically, none of those groups are participating in this, this betting situation. So yeah, this is fans. This is pure loyalists, as you mentioned, and folks that see through a black and gold lens. And hey, look, it's fun. It's the talk of the sport right now, and crazier things have happened. I mean, again, TCU, to bring them back into it, was 5-7 in 2021. Obviously, turned it around pretty quickly, but we could all understand that it's a bit of a bigger rebuild in Boulder than what we saw in Fort Worth. But the formula was not making a bowl, hire a new coach with some offensive prowess, and go from there. So in that regard, Colorado is following TCU's footsteps, but yeah, I'd still probably hold on to my dollars here.
Yeah, we're not a betting advice channel, but us personally would probably not be throwing down the Chris Benjamin for a Colorado Natty. It is something that I wrote about, I think, when we first launched the Athlon portion of our Colorado coverage. Urban Meyer and Joel Clapp both have Colorado contending for a playoff spot by year 2. So I think year 2 seems more realistic, if we're being honest. I think you get another group of transfers in because it's going to happen. There's going to be transfer portal players all over, and then your high school kids that you brought in this year have another year under their belt, and then whatever high school kids you bring in that are able to contribute instantly. The more Deion Sanders guys, I think the better this Colorado team will be. But yeah, it was just surprising to see that there's so many people confident that this will happen year 1.
Yeah, good luck to them for sure.
Good luck, best of luck, and I hope that I hope it was like a free bet, because I know FanDuel, or one of our lovely sponsors, offers a free bet. So hopefully it was that one. Who knows? But we have to give a lovely shout out to another one of our sponsors, Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me, where you want to get healthier but don't want to compromise taste, I've got just the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built Bar, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious you won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, the real stuff, not the fake stuff. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're healthy, only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at BuiltBar.com or at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. You could thank me later. Woof. Okay, get your gains, get your healthiness in. Someone who's going to need to get some health and wealth in the state of Florida is Mike Norvell. Deion Sanders is coming for that pot of gold he's got kind of locked down over there in Tallahassee. And he talked about it with Patrick Peterson on their podcast, which it is called, it's slipping my mind right now. I have it right here. I don't have it right here. All Things Covered, excuse me. And so he was talking about Deion Sanders and how he's noticed a big difference in how Prime has tried to take over Florida. And he said, we know that's one school, aka Colorado, with one coach who's trying to get into Florida and get the best we have. And he said, Prime has obviously had a great career and is doing great things in the coaching profession. As a Florida State Seminole, we are happy for him and the track of his career and what's going on in the coaching world. Obviously he was asked about it, as it wasn't something he just brought up on his own, but I do think him saying that it's obvious that Florida or Colorado is trying to get into Florida, I think the presence is being made felt. And can you talk about that, John, since you're in Miami and experiencing it as we speak?
Well, look no further than the corners, right? I mean, you talk about Travis Hunter, long time, nearly 2-year verbal commitment to Florida State with South Florida roots. That was the big splash Deion made at JSU. And of course, Travis Hunter is certainly on board at Colorado just 3 days after entering the portal back in December. And then Cormani McClain, another one, a long-time elite target for everybody in the state of Florida and well beyond, but Cormani's a Florida guy. So all three of those in-state schools, Florida, Florida State, Miami, certainly felt good at different points for Cormani McClain, and obviously was committed to Miami and, of course, famously flipped to Colorado, I believe in the month of January at this point. My dates are getting a little bit cloudy, but I think it's always unique from the Florida State angle, right? Because Deion is a legend there in Tallahassee and in football and baseball and everything else that he comes along with. And at different points of the process, a lot of people in and around that Seminole program have wondered about Deion potentially taking over. And I know right now, as we currently speak, FSU's riding high, right? Mike Norvell, big turnaround season in 2022. I believe he just signed a huge extension. But before that, if you go back 12 months or so, there was some hot seat talk. And there was, again, the kind of the regurgitated topic, the evergreen topic of, is FSU going to call Deion Sanders for this gig? There's so many layers to that. There was talk about Deion getting the job at multiple points. He was kind of public about it at one point, but it didn't work out. So there's kind of an underlying thought that there's a bitterness here from Deion towards his alma mater, and naturally, when you're overlapping that with college football recruiting and your ties to the state of Florida, it's going to have an impact, a direct impact on Florida State, as well as all the other schools, regardless of how true that kind of bitter sentiment may be from Deion's case. And now that he's in the Power Five, you should expect it even more. When we get to the spring evaluation period here in a couple of months, and these coaches can hit the road, you better believe Colorado coaches will be scattered throughout the Sunshine State. They've obviously brought in several natives, as we mentioned, McLean, Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn through the transfer portal. Isaiah Harge is a receiver from St. Thomas Aquinas that signed in 2023. They've already made a Florida impact, and they've pulled from just about all the schools in the process. We mentioned transfers or commitments to Florida State. They brought in a Florida O-line transfer this past year. They brought in multiple USF transfers, including Jimmy Horn, who we just mentioned. So, yeah, the schools itself are certainly feeling Deion and Colorado's presence all in one motion down here. And that's in short order, right? That's in emergency piece together the class mode. Now, as you turn to 2024, you got a full calendar. You got a full 12 months, as we said, spring evaluation season, summer official visits, and obviously Colorado game visits. How many Floridians are going to trek to Boulder for official visits and or game visits during the season? That number will be high. I just saw a Florida State commitment today, Cam Davis, the longest tenured Florida State commitment, which might bring up some Travis Hunter bells for Seminole fans. He just said he needs to get out to Colorado for his first trip out there. Been committed to FSU since, I think, 2021. So there is going to be a thorn in a lot of these folks' sides in Florida, and naturally Deion Sanders is going to be on the other end of it. It's one thing to get the kids on campus. It's another to close them, but we've already seen the tangible with Deion being able to do this across the country, not just in his home state of Florida. So it'll be fascinating, but it'll be a topic we talk about plenty getting into the thick of the recruiting off season, if you will, and certainly once we get back to football season in the fall.
Yeah, I think especially for Florida State, the Deion to Florida State rumor, that kind of those stars almost aligned. I think the near tipping point was Deion actually getting Travis Hunter from Mike Norvell, who that was supposed to be like his job-saving signee at the time. Obviously, he saved his own job with a great season this past year, but that was like his big win. And then all of a sudden, signing day, Travis Hunter is going to Jackson State, and all the Florida State fans were calling for his head. And I think if Florida State has a bad season, and this is all just speculation, and Mike Norvell loses the gig, I'm pretty sure there'd be a lot of Deion to Florida State rumors. The stars were perfectly aligned because Deion obviously he took the Colorado job, so he was fine with moving on. I think it would have been hard to turn down his alma mater, despite how much he loves Boulder now, but I think it would have been tough to turn it down. That's just one interesting nugget. Two, he's already made an impact in Florida, like John touched on. I have the numbers in front of me. He brought in 7 people from the state of Florida, some from the high school ranks and then some from the transfer ranks. I believe 4 transfer players and then 3 high school players from the state of Florida. And like you said, he's attracting the top kids. It's not like these random, like, I'm not saying that these guys are random 3 stars or whatever, but he's attracting Cormani McLean. He's attracting Travis Hunter or whoever it may be. Jimmy Horn was a top transfer from Florida or USF. Xavier Weaver, who's their newest addition from the transfer portal, another Floridian. And so he has that appeal. And I think something that's worth noting too is that of the top 50 recruits in the 2024 class, almost 30% of them hail from the state of Florida. I think it's at 24%, 25%. And so that's a big percentage of the top recruits. They're all coming from Florida. And if Colorado even has a puncher's chance with them, that's better than what they've had in the past, because Florida is like this untapped tree that they haven't been able to climb up lately.
100%. And like we said, it starts with the visits, right? You get kids out to something that is a huge contrast to what they're used to here in the state of Florida. And all of a sudden, their eyes are widened. And then that's before you get to Deion and that coaching staff, the pitch and the easy sell of playing time, all of which some of the schools closer to home can't offer some of these kids. So it'll be fascinating. And yeah, the 24 class, I think, will be pretty telling. I would expect a pretty significant pull from the state of Florida for Prime in his first full recruiting cycle as the head coach of Colorado.
And it definitely shows that he's on the radar of, like, we knew Deion Sanders was on the radar of college coaches all over, but to see Florida coaches specifically being like, yeah, it's obvious that he wants to come here. They probably, I doubt the Florida coaches have a GM, but if they did, you just know they'd be like, here he comes again. I see the plane coming from Boulder. Like these Florida coaches are probably not scared, because every Florida program is bringing in probably 10 to 15 Florida kids a year, but there's going to be a handful of kids that they're not going to get. And it's going to be going to Colorado, Ohio State, Texas, all these big programs that want the Florida ties. And Deion Sanders, within 3 months on the job, I was already kind of built a pipeline. That's pretty insane. Before we move on, I also have to thank you for making Locked On Buffs your first listen of the day. Make sure to check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, hear from big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, John, we've been talking Shedeur Sanders a lot frequently. He's I deemed him the biggest wild card in college football. These Colorado fans that are betting all their money on Colorado winning the championship will need a big Shedeur Sanders season.
You would think.
Yeah, you would think. And then some people are ranking him like the 7th best quarterback in the conference. So the scale is all over on Shedeur Sanders. We won't know how good he is until he starts actually playing. He tore up the FCS level, threw for 70 touchdowns, nearly 7,000 yards. But he is now starting to draw comparisons to another FCS transfer to Power 5 transfer, Cam Ward, who's at Washington State, interconference transfer too. They're drawing comparisons. Big arm, mobile, tore up the FCS level. What do you think of that comparison? And also, I also want to throw out the fact that Colorado's coach, let me pull up his name right here, because I always feel like I'm going to mess it up. Bartolone, if I'm saying that correctly, Brent Bartolone, worked with Nevada. He compared Shedeur Sanders' arm strength to Carson Strong's, who was probably one of Nevada's best quarterbacks of all time outside of Colin Kaepernick, who's from my hometown, by the way. So yeah, what do you think of the Shedeur Sanders to Cam Ward comp and the high praise for his arm strength?
Yeah, I certainly understand the arm strength praise. I think the Cam Ward stuff is, look, it's precedent, so it's important to bring up, but I think otherwise these guys are really different. Like you said, they're making the same jump, so in that regard, it overlaps. But outside of, I guess, mobility, I don't see a lot of similarities between Shedeur and Cam. I like them both. Let me make that clear. We covered Cam very heavily when he was in the portal, very coveted portal quarterback coming from the Incarnate Word School in Texas. But Shedeur's got so much more polish and upside to his game, in my mind. That's not because this is a Colorado podcast. Just watch them one-to-one. Pull up the YouTube, pull up whatever you need. Even going back to the high school stuff where Shedeur was in Texas. And I think he was just a couple steps ahead at the same stage. Because remember, Shedeur is a couple years younger than Cam. And naturally, with Deion as your father, you're going to get a little bit more, push, a little bit more coaching. So it's understandable that from a footwork perspective, from a mechanical perspective of his arm, I think you see more polish from Shedeur. He's got a very classic over-the-top to 90-degree delivery. Cam is very fluid with his arm angles, a lot of sidearm stuff, quick games, new age and modern stuff. I think Shedeur is more classic with his mechanics. Naturally, both are athletic, both are very comfortable moving in the pocket. And I think with Cam, it's a little bit more instinctive. Shedeur's feels more calculated. Shedeur is very on time. 1, 2, 3 hitch, get through the progression. If it's not there, take off. I think Cam will take a little bit more risk in some of that inter-pocket decision making. And then when they do both tuck the football and move with it, same deal. Shedeur is very efficient, very calculated, very linear with some of his movement skills. And Cam is a little bit more wide open. You know, he's got a little bit more wiggle. He's a little bit bigger as well. So I think you see some variance even from the mobility standpoint. But yes, they are both making the jump from SCS to Power 5. And like we saw Cam Ward take some bumps and bruises in 2022, I think you should probably expect something similar from Shedeur. But it's for totally different reasons. That Washington State offense is very quarterback dominant, right? You've got the football every single play, and even the runs, as far as I know, are coming off of that. I think with what what Colorado is going to do with Shedeur and Sean Lewis, I think it's going to be a lot more point guard-esque, where you're just the ball distributor. You're the first guy in, last guy out type of deal. So it's going to be a lot more mental and decision making as opposed to physical, which is what we saw last year from Cam Ward at Wazoo. So I do think Shedeur is going to have an opportunity to hit the ground running a little bit better than Cam. But that said, the Pac-12 is loaded, right? We talk about all these quarterbacks. These defenses are not shying away. They're all improving there simultaneously. So from a number standpoint, I really wouldn't look at the two. Ward in 22 and Shedeur in 2023. I think it's kind of a crapshoot in that regard. But whether you talk about their mechanics or their kind of upbringing, I do think these two are fairly different. But I understand the parallel of that precedent that is now set going from FCS quarterback to the Power 5. To the Pac-12 specifically.
Yeah, I think the comparisons from a broad perspective are there. Like you said, Cam Ward has a little more. He honestly reminded me of Johnny Manziel. Obviously, Johnny Manziel was much more accomplished as a college quarterback up to this point, but I watched him against Oregon, especially against Wisconsin. He just has like these moments where it's like all of a sudden he's running backwards, he's running to the side.
It's like high risk, high reward.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Shedeur, I don't want to compare him to another like quarterback from Oregon, I guess, Marcus Mariota, where it's like if the pocket breaks down, he's going to run. But it's not like Marcus Mariota had some magical moments, obviously, but it's not like he's craving those where he's bobbling the ball, jumping over linemen type of thing. It's like he runs when it's necessary. And I think that's the big difference. The arm strength comparison to Carson Strong that's a big comp. Regardless of what Carson Strong is now, he had some injury issues that prevented him from kind of getting that look in the NFL. His arm strength was out of this world. He could probably touch the entire field with a flick of the wrist. And so that's big praise. I don't know if we actually got to see Shedeur Sanders' arm strength on full display at Jackson State, but we will probably get to see it with Sean Lewis, especially when you think of Xavier Weaver. I kind of detailed what his role would be. I kind of see him as Colorado's wide receiver 1 at this point. He's a jump ball catcher. He's kind of big and physical, and I think he plays bigger than 6'1". And then you have Jimmy Horn, who's a speedster in his own right. Probably could run by people at any chance. And then they have the returning guys who will all duke it out for that third spot. And so I think we're going to get to see Shedeur's arm in a different manner than how we did at Jackson State. But it was interesting. They also, this was a comp from 24/7 because people were a lot of the issues with Shedeur right now is that they think all of his hype and the skill set isn't there just because he's Deion's son. And we talked about the pressure that he's facing on our last episode. He was rated as a 4-star. He had the Bama offers. He had the whatever offer you could think of. He probably had it. It was just a personal decision for him to go to Jackson State and Florida Atlantic. I believe he's at one point committed to. I think he just saw those as better fits for himself. But he had all the offers. He was recruited by all the major programs. And he's like the opposite of the telltale sign that Dylan McCaffrey had is the opposite comparison he's getting, because Dylan McCaffrey was a highly touted prospect that every time he would play against better competition kind of fizzled. And now he's at Northern Colorado. And I think his own dad had to bench him, unfortunately, which is a tough scenario. So I don't think Shedeur Sanders is like that just because he has the skill set. It was his choice to end up there, not really out of necessity. And so now that he's at a Power 5 with more weapons and all that, I think we'll see he's probably somewhere in between Cam Ward and Bo Nix, I guess you could say, in terms of like skill set. He obviously doesn't play like them, but I think his skill set is much more advanced than people want to give him credit.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a next factor with him, because of all of the expected pressure that he's had to deal with at every point, as you mentioned, going back to recruiting, even being around Shedeur a little bit when he was in high school, the kid is poised. There's really no. Could you imagine? And I stood behind Shedeur for 2 hours at a 7-on-7 many years ago. Every single ball that wasn't completed, you already know the type of words that were being hailed from the opposite sideline, from all of the defenses, the coaches, the parents. We were grown men were talking down to Shedeur Sanders in person. And this was a random off-season 7-on-7 event. So this kid has dealt with doubters at such a high clip because of his father's enormous shadow. So I do think that is something intangible that will absolutely help Shedeur make this transition. He's got this stoicism about him. He'll let loose a little bit after some touchdowns, which is fine, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of Jalen Hurts, and just that nothing really rattles him play by play. Throw a pick, fumble, get absolutely wrecked by a defensive end. None of those things appear to really rattle this kid, because he's kind of gone through most of everything that a quarterback can go through at this young age. I think he's 20 years old at this point. So I do think that's another intangible that places him just more benefit of the doubt in trying to make this very difficult transition.
Yeah, I think an adequate comp in terms of hype and expectation would probably be Texas's Quinn Ewers. Obviously Quinn was a perfectly rated #1 overall recruit who went to Ohio State, didn't play. But in terms of hype and expectations, year one, obviously I would say he's a more proven college passer at this point than Quinn is. But the hype is there. And I think all the expectations are there. Probably same thing with Arch Manning, to stick with the Texas thing, a notable name who people want to kind of, there's like a pride or a sense of joy when someone deflects a Shedeur Sanders pass or an Arch Manning pass, because I just deflected Deion Sanders' son's pass, or I just intercepted a Manning. Like there's a whole pressure that Cam Ward will never face. Maybe Dylan McCaffrey had it at one point, but obviously didn't get to on the field enough to kind of live up to the expectations. But there's a sense of pressure that comes from just being the son of someone or a relative of someone in the case of Arch Manning. And so I think in terms of Cam Ward and Shedeur, yes, they did come up from the FCS level. Yes, they kind of have they both have big arms, but that's a very different comparison like we've been talking about. I just think that Shedeur is probably pressure-wise on the level of Caleb Williams. Obviously, Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in college football, but pressure-wise, in terms of as soon as Shedeur throws that first pick, you already know that video is going to go viral. Colorado loses their first game, you know that all the tweets are going to go viral, and it is what it is. That's just how it's going to be. But that's just the amount of pressure that he's facing as a transfer right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. There's a lot, and we talked about this last week. There's so much buzz and momentum that people are naturally, and this is going to increase over time, people are naturally starting to say, this is too much, right? So now it's going to start to trickle down to the schedule and the games and the players themselves. So yeah, as much as the Colorado brand has been boosted, you've created a new kind of army of haters along the way. And I know Deion loves that, but it will come up plenty in the next calendar year or so. And unfortunately for Shedeur, he's going to be the on-field center of pretty much all of that as the season gets going. So, very much looking forward to seeing how he responds. But again, I think he's the type of kid that is built for that. A la Caleb Williams, great one to bring up in that regard. Puts that type of pressure on himself. We did a blog with Caleb Williams at Sports Illustrated, and like the first blog we did was, I want to win the Heisman Trophy and be the #1 pick in the draft. That was like the first thing he ever told me. And I was like, okay, this will be entertaining. And he's checked off one of those boxes in a pretty big way. And the other one looks pretty good too. So
yeah, the other one's penciled in.
Those quarterbacks are their own breed. And again, he's not as outspoken as Caleb is with it, but it's very similar just in terms of how the two carry themselves. So yeah, I look forward to seeing how Shedeur deals with all of it as QB1 for Colorado.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think Colorado as a whole, obviously on the radar of a lot of people. It's on the radar of Florida State and all the Florida schools. It's on the radar of the bettors. And now Shedeur Sanders is kind of on the national radar. Cam Ward drawing comps to basically every transfer quarterback possible just to see what, because a lot of people are unfamiliar with him. And so they're trying to see how to compare him and what to expect from him. We want to thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Buffs. Thank you for making it your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Experts Isaac Shad and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court, plus hear from big name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We here at Locked On are available on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We're free. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, give us 5 stars. We're going to have some big interviews coming up that we're pretty excited about. And so make sure to stay along for the journey. We got some big things coming up. We'll see you guys tomorrow.